My stepdaughter yelled, "You're not even on my birth certificate. Don't tell me what to do." So I stopped doing anything at all. No pickups, no paperwork, no more dad on demand. Her mother started showing up to detention instead. My name is Tom Harper. I'm 47 years old. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and for the last 8 years, I've been married to a woman named Hannah. When I married her, I didn't just marry into a relationship. I married into a structure that already had missing beams. I became a stepfather to her daughter, Ellie, who was 9 when I met her. And from the very beginning, I understood what I was walking into. A house where I would never hang my own name on the walls. Ellie had wild eyes and silence back then. She didn't trust easily, and I didn't force my way in. Her real father, Dad, as she still called him then, floated in and out of her life like seasonal weather. A man of grand entrances and no follow-through. He'd show up with glittering smiles, whisper soft promises into her ears, then vanish before the ink of those words had time to dry. So I filled in the cracks. No fanfare, no asking for thanks, just presence. I picked her up from school, made sure her permission slips were turned in, taught her how to ride a bike without training wheels. I was the one who sat through every recital, every play, every meeting where the teachers used words like bright but distracted. I paid for her braces, her therapy sessions, her summer camps, always in full, always without hesitation. At first, I wasn't Dad. I was just Tom, the guy who cooked breakfast on weekends, who bought the wrong brand of cereal, who couldn't figure out Snapchat. I took what I could get, and slowly, she softened. She'd sit next to me on the couch instead of across the room. She'd ask me questions about the world, about how to balance equations or tie a tie. She even called me Dad, once by accident, then looked down at the floor like she'd broken something delicate. I didn't correct her. By the time she was 12, I was the one the school called first when she got sick. When her biological father forgot her birthday for the 2nd year in a row, I was the one who showed up with a small wrapped box and a cake already half decorated. I didn't do it to win her over. I did it because she was a child, and someone had to stay when others left. I wish I could say those years built something permanent. But that's not how this works. The cracks began small. Door closed more often. Laughter aimed at me, not with me. She'd call me Tom again, but now it carried a tone. Something dismissive, cold. I chalked it up to puberty. Teenagers stretch their independence like new muscles. That's what I told myself. Then came the sarcasm. Tom doesn't get it. Tom's not really a parent. Tom just pays for things. She'd say it like a joke, around friends, at the dinner table, on social media where she thought I wouldn't see. Each comment chipped away something. And every time I brought it up, Hannah would shrug and say, "She's just being a teenager. She doesn't mean it." But Ellie meant it. She meant it every time she used me as the punchline to her real father's absence. Still, I showed up. I drove her to practices, sat through her college prep meetings, helped with her essays, called out when she skipped assignments. I kept showing up. Until the grocery store. I remember that day with clinical detail. Bright lights overhead, artificial and buzzing. The hum of freezers and the sterile smell of floor wax. I asked her to grab a gallon of milk. She was scrolling her phone, fingers twitching like she was typing an escape route. She didn't move. "Ellie?" I said, gentler this time. "Milk." She looked up at me. No emotion, no hesitation. Just the cold truth she'd been sharpening in secret. "You're not even on my birth certificate. Don't tell me what to do." The sentence hit like a car crash without sound. I stood there, milk still sitting untouched in the cooler. She didn't yell it. That made it worse. It was a clean strike. Practiced. Intentional. Meant to draw blood, and it did. I didn't answer. I didn't raise my voice. I walked past her, grabbed the milk myself, and continued through the aisle like a man who just stepped through his own funeral. On the drive home, she put in her earbuds. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When we pulled into the driveway, she got out before the engine stopped. Hannah asked if everything was okay. I lied, said Ellie was just in a mood. But I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room staring at the family photos on the wall, photos I paid to have taken, framed, hung. In one of them, Ellie's leaning against my shoulder in a red scarf I bought her for Christmas. She's smiling. I stared at that smile until I hated it. That's when I made the decision. No more. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream or make speeches. I just stopped. Stopped driving her to school. Stopped replying to her teachers. Stopped filling out her medical forms, paying her lunch account, arranging her rides. I went into the school portal and removed myself as an emergency contact. I logged into my bank and canceled the auto payments for her voice lessons and club fees. If I didn't exist on paper, I wouldn't exist in practice. She got detention a week later and had to sit in the office for 2 hours before someone could pick her up. Her mom had forgotten. When she got home, she didn't even look at me. Just went straight upstairs, slammed the door, locked it. The next day, Hannah cornered me in the kitchen, accused me of being petty, of abandoning Ellie emotionally. "You're making a statement," she said. I nodded. "Damn right I am. If you care about her, you wouldn't do this." "If I'm not her father," I said, "why the hell am I playing the part?" She didn't have an answer, and neither did I, not one I liked. But it was too late for questions. Too late for doubt. This was the bill coming due. The strange thing about absence is how loud it gets. The silence in the house grew teeth. I didn't speak to Ellie unless absolutely necessary. She didn't speak to me at all. We existed in separate orbits, passing each other in hallways like strangers renting different lives. Her shoes still sat by the door. Her cereal still lived in the same spot in the pantry. But the rhythm was different, quieter, emptier, and slowly, things began to break in places I had predicted, but refused to fix. The first crack came 2 weeks after the grocery store. Ellie missed her theater rehearsal. No one had driven her. She sat on the porch that evening, arms crossed, face tight. She didn't ask where I had been. She knew. The second crack came when she missed her annual health screening at school. The forms were never turned in. They had been left on the kitchen counter, waiting for a signature that never came. I had always signed those. This time I didn't. I watched it all happen from a distance. Watched as the machine started stalling without the parts one used to oil in silence. No one had remembered the parent orientation for her upcoming field trip. No one signed her out for an early dismissal. Her phone calls to Hannah went unanswered. Her texts to her real dad, I later learned, were ignored. That was the night she came home soaked to the skin. It had rained hard, the kind of southern storm that paints the sky in slate and rips the warmth out of the air. Her bus had already left. Her mother hadn't come. She'd walked 1/2 mile in the dark. She stepped through the door like a ghost, water dripping from her hair, sneakers squeaking on the floorboards. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, and I looked up from the kitchen table, saw the puddle forming around her feet, and felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just confirmation. She went upstairs without a sound. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. She had told me who I was, or rather, who I wasn't. Now the world was showing her what that meant. 2 days later, I heard her on the phone. Her voice cracked. "He's not answering me. I've texted him like 6 times. Her father. The one whose name sits on her birth certificate like a decorative signature on a blank check. She thought he'd come through. She always did. And that's when the shift began. Subtle at first. Her eyes met mine in the kitchen. Not long, just a glance that held a little less resentment, a little more uncertainty. She started asking small things. "Have you seen my headphones? Do you know where Mom went?" I answered, but nothing more. I didn't rush to pick her up from school when she missed the bus again. I didn't step in when she forgot a lunch or a form or a due date. I sat back and let her real father fill the gap she claimed I didn't belong to. But he never did. He didn't text. He didn't call. He didn't send money, didn't check in, didn't even ask how she was. When she missed school for a fever, he didn't know. When her midterms came and she stressed over biology and algebra, he wasn't there to help her study. I was, not because she asked, but because I heard her crying behind her bedroom door. I left a study guide outside her room the next morning. Just slid it under without a note. She used it. I found it dog-eared, highlighted, and that's how the ice began to thaw, one unspoken gesture at a time. A week later, she sat beside me in the kitchen. Not across. Not standing in the doorway like I was some guarded checkpoint she had to pass through. She sat, quiet, her hands clasped in her lap. I didn't look at her at first, just kept drinking my coffee, flipping through emails on my phone. Then she said it, voice low, almost inaudible. "I'm sorry." 2 words. No conditions. "No, but you hurt me too." Just a straight apology dropped like a stone in water. I set the mug down and looked at her. And what I saw wasn't rebellion or anger anymore. It was fear, regret. A kid who had been told all her life that blood mattered more than presence, and who was only just learning how wrong that was. "I'm sorry too," I said. "I pulled back too hard. Let's try again." And just like that, a thread was reattached. Fragile, thin, but real. She nodded, then went upstairs without another word. But her step was different. Slower, lighter. That was the first time in months I slept soundly. Still, things weren't fixed. Not really. Because as Ellie and I rebuilt something quiet and careful, Hannah began to see the cracks too. And this time, they didn't come from me. One afternoon, Ellie was stuck at school again. Something about a missing project and needing a parent to sign off so she could retake the assignment. Hannah had to leave work early. She called me afterward, frustrated. "She didn't tell me until the last minute," she said. "You usually catch these things. Why didn't you?" She trailed off. She knew. I didn't say anything. 2 days later, we sat across from each other at the dinner table. Ellie was upstairs. The air between us was brittle. "I messed up," Hannah said, her voice barely a whisper. I waited. "I let her believe you were optional. And you weren't." It took everything I had not to say, "I know." Instead I said, "Then no more good cop, bad cop. We're either both parents or we're neither." She nodded. And this time I believed her. After that, we moved as a unit. When Ellie forgot to clean up, Hannah backed me. When Ellie argued over screen time, we held the line together. And slowly, Ellie stopped seeing us as 2 camps she could play against each other. She started seeing us as what we had been all along. Family. Even her language shifted. Tom stopped being a weapon. She used it softly, like it belonged to someone she trusted. She stopped mentioning her father as often. And when she did, it came with a shrug, not a glow. Then one night, I fixed the outlet in her bedroom, the one that had been shorting out for months. As I packed up the tools, Ellie stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. "I think you're the real dad," she said, quiet, "because you stayed, even when it was hard." I didn't cry. I didn't say much at all, just smiled. And for once, she smiled back. But here's the thing about redemption in a house like this. It never fully arrives. You don't get neat conclusions. Just small victories earned slowly. And you keep earning them every day. That was the end of the war, maybe, but not the end of the debt. Because wounds don't close all at once. They scab, they scar, and sometimes they open back up when you least expect it. Ellie wasn't the only one who had to learn how absence shapes a household. That lesson found Hannah too, though hers came later, messier, wrapped in consequences she never thought would reach her. It started with a voicemail. Ellie's father, the real one, the one with rights and no responsibilities, must have sensed a change. Maybe it was the dwindling texts from Ellie, the sudden quiet. Maybe it was guilt dressed as curiosity. Or maybe someone whispered that the girl who used to hang on his rare appearances no longer checked her phone for his name. He called. Not to check in. Not to say hello. He called to accuse. I stood in the kitchen, coffee half brewed, when my phone lit up. The message played on speaker as I stood frozen, listening to a man I'd never met pretend to have authority over a world he abandoned years ago. "Don't think I don't know what you're doing," his voice barked, heavy with that special kind of coward's rage. "You're turning my daughter against me. You don't get to erase me just because you married her mother." Then he had the nerve to threaten legal action. I deleted the message before the coffee finished brewing. When I told Hannah, she flinched. Not from fear, from shame. She knew who he was. She'd always known. But she let him linger in Ellie's life like a ghost story. Someone to keep alive because the truth was harder than the myth. After that call, Ellie stopped mentioning him altogether. She didn't need to. I saw it in the way she moved. Slower, more guarded. I saw it when she left her phone on the table, screen facing down, as if to avoid the disappointment of another silent day. I saw it in the way she folded laundry beside me one evening and said, without looking up, "You ever wish people would just mean what they say?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. A month passed like that. Quiet days. Uneasy peace. Ellie started asking for help again. Not orders, not obligations. Real help. Homework. Driving lessons. How to talk to her friends after a fight. The little things that used to fall into my lap by default. Now they were offered like gifts. Like trust. But healing isn't free. The debt always comes due. One morning, I walked into the living room and saw the envelope. Thick. Government seal on the front. Hannah was sitting on the couch, her face blank, hands trembling. She didn't speak as I opened it. It was a formal request from Ellie's father. He wanted more structured visitation. He wanted to rebuild what had been damaged by third-party interference. And he wanted joint custody renegotiated. A man who hadn't paid child support in 5 years. Who never showed for a dentist appointment. Who sent late birthday texts and called that love. Now he wanted to rewrite history. I stared at the letter, then at Hannah. She looked up at me with eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Eyes that belonged to a woman who had finally run out of ways to explain the choices she'd made. "I never thought he'd come back," she said. "Not really." I didn't say anything, because I had. They always come back, the ghosts, the cowards, the absent. Not to fix things, but to stir the dust and call it justice. We met with a lawyer. Explained everything. Showed receipts, literal ones. From doctors, from schools, from every year I paid out of pocket while he sent excuses. The lawyer asked if we wanted to push for sole custody. Hannah looked at me. For once, she didn't answer first. I said yes. The court agreed. Ellie was 17 now. Old enough to testify. Old enough to tell the judge, in her own words, that biology wasn't a substitute for effort. I wasn't in the room when she said it. I didn't want to be. But Hannah told me later. "She said you were the one who stayed," Hannah whispered. "She said, he's not my father. He's just the man who left." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just nodded. And still part of me ached. Because I knew this wasn't victory. It wasn't closure. It was loss dressed as truth. It was the final line on a page we never meant to write. But it gave us space. Real space. Ellie started to talk about college. Psychology. She said she wanted to help kids from messy homes. Her words, not mine. I helped her search for schools. She asked if I could visit campuses with her. I said of course. We mapped out weekends. Applied for loans. She never once asked her father for help. And one night, while filling out an application, she reached the parent information section. Do I put you here?" she asked. I stared at the screen. The box said father's name. It was empty. "It's up to you," I said. She typed slowly, each letter like a small rebellion. Thomas Harper. My name. And just like that, something old fell away. We didn't throw a party. Didn't make a speech. But the silence after that moment felt different. Heavier. Sacred. She clicked, submit, then closed the laptop. She said, "Thank you," and left the room. It was the most honest moment we'd ever shared. But peace, real peace, doesn't come without weight. Because there are still nights when I sit at the table and think about the years I lost trying to earn something that should have been freely given. Years of invisible labor. Years of being second place in a house I helped hold together. Even now, Hannah sometimes hesitates. Sometimes, when Ellie and I laugh too hard, she watches us from across the room like she's measuring something. I don't blame her. She built the life that made this possible. But she also let it erode through silence, through neutrality, through comfort. You don't need to strike the match to be responsible for the fire. Sometimes standing still is just another way of saying go ahead. But now she tries. She asks before she steps in. She lets me speak without echoing my words. And when Ellie hugs me goodnight, she doesn't flinch anymore. There's still distance, still hesitation, but it's shrinking. Ellie's packing now for college. She asked if I'd help her pick out bedding. Said I have better taste than her mom. I laughed, not because it's true, but because it was hers to offer. That's all I ever wanted. Not a title, not ownership, just the choice freely made. And now she's made it. But still, late at night, when the house is quiet, I ask myself the same question. Why did it take this long? Why did I have to step away for anyone to see what I was holding? And more than that, if I hadn't pulled back, would they ever have noticed? That's the part one can't forgive. Not in them, in me, because I enabled it. Year after year, hoping presence would become value, that effort would evolve into recognition. But that's not how it works. In this house, the louder voice was always the one missing, the father who vanished, then called in demands from the sidelines. And mine, the one that stayed, was drowned out by expectation. Now the bill's been paid. The court made it official. The forms are filled. The rooms are quieter. But scars don't care about paper. They just remind you, day after day, what it costs to be invisible. People think the end of conflict feels like relief. But what I felt wasn't relief. It was absence. Like a wall I'd leaned on for years had been quietly taken away. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. Stillness where the weight used to be. A shape in the house that no longer fit. Ellie was gone now, off to college in North Carolina. I carried her suitcase to the dorm, watched her hang up posters, met her roommate, walked her schedule with her like a ghost from some other life. She hugged me before I left. A real hug. No tension. No flinch. The kind you only give someone when you don't know when you'll see them again. I drove home alone. 3.5 hours of highway and static and questions I couldn't answer. Did I do enough? Did I do too much? Did I spend 8 years earning something that should have never been a transaction in the first place? When I got home, the house was too quiet. Hannah was still at work. The porch light was off. The dog, our dog, the one Ellie used to walk without being asked, didn't come to the door. He passed last spring. Another gap no one talks about. I walked through the empty rooms. Kitchen. Living room. Her bedroom door still open. Bed stripped. Desk bare. The same photo sat on the dresser. Us at the state fair 2 summers ago. Cotton candy in her hand. My arm around her shoulder. I couldn't look at it long. It hurt too much. Because I remembered the year before that, when she told me I wasn't on her birth certificate. How we got here from there still doesn't make sense. Not entirely. It's not a straight road. It circles. Loops. 1,000 choices that all point in the same direction once you've already arrived. The truth? I still feel like I lost. Even after the apology. Even after the college forms with my name typed in. Even after the night she told me, with tears in her eyes, I'm proud you're my parent. I still feel like something in me died back there. Something I can't get back. Because once a child tells you that you don't matter, some part of you believes them. Even after they change their mind. Even after they outgrow the anger. It sits in your bones. Quiet. Permanent. And I wonder sometimes if that part was my fault. Because I was the adult. I should have known better. I should have demanded more from the start. Respect, boundaries, clarity. I shouldn't have let silence pass for peace. I shouldn't have let Tom hang in the air like a placeholder while I did the job of a father. But when you love someone else's child, you learn to accept crumbs. You tell yourself it's enough that they don't hate you, that they let you stay, that they don't push you out. You call that love. But it's not. Love without respect is slavery. And I wore those chains smiling for years. The hardest part of all this wasn't the rejection. It wasn't the yelling or the slammed doors or the empty birthdays from her real dad. It wasn't even the grocery store, when she said those words in that tone, loud enough for strangers to hear. It was the realization that I had trained them to see me as background. Reliable. Silent. replaceable. And Hannah, God, Hannah. She didn't protect me. Not when it mattered. Not when Ellie turned me into a ghost in my own house. She said all the right things after the damage was done. But during, she let it slide. Let it stew. Let it become a pattern. She told me once, "You're stronger than her dad. She needs you more." But what she meant was, you can take the hits. So take them. That's what people do to stepfathers. They make you the buffer, the scapegoat, the emotional crash pad. You absorb what the real father abandoned, and then you're blamed for not being him. It's a thankless trade. You spend years being the net, and when they finally learn to walk on their own, you're forgotten. Not because they hate you, but because they never knew what you were holding up. I remember a night last winter. Ellie was crying. College was coming, and her real dad hadn't returned her calls in over a year. She asked me, "Why doesn't he want to know me?" I didn't have the heart to say what I really felt. That he didn't want to know her because knowing her would mean seeing his own failure. That every time she looked at him, he saw what he gave up. That she deserved more. That she always had. But I also didn't say the other thing, the selfish thing clawing at my throat. That I wanted her to stop chasing ghosts. That I wanted her to see me as enough. Instead, I sat beside her and let her cry. Because being a father, even a fake one, means putting your need for closure beneath their need to grieve. Even when you're grieving too. And now she's gone. Off to begin her life. I still get texts. Little things. Photos of her dorm. Her new friends. The first fall leaf that dropped outside her window. She signs off with "love you" more often now. Not every time, but more than before. Sometimes she calls me Dad when she forgets herself. And sometimes she corrects it. It doesn't hurt anymore. Not the way it used to. It just leaves a bruise that fades slower than you'd expect. Last week she called just to talk. No crisis. No request. Just talked. She told me about a psychology class she's taking. Said they were learning about attachment theory. About how a child's early years shape the way they love or don't. "I think I was messed up about that," she said. "About love. About who shows up." I waited. Then she added, "But I get it now. I get what you did. And I'm sorry it took me so long." I smiled into the phone. She couldn't see it, but I smiled. And then she said it. "You didn't have to stay, but you did. That means something. And maybe that's the most I'll ever get. Maybe it's all any stepfather ever gets. But I'll take it, because she's right. I didn't have to stay. I chose to. And now, when people ask if I have kids, I say yes. One daughter. She's in college. Wants to help people. Has her mother's eyes and, despite everything, maybe a little bit of my stubbornness too. I don't tell them the rest. I don't tell them about the early years, the silence, the fights, the court hearings, the day she told me I was just the guy who married her mom. That part belongs to me. That's the toll I paid for this small, earned peace. So now I ask you, all of you who think love is enough, who believe that time and effort guarantee recognition. Was I wrong? Was I wrong to pull back until they noticed what I carried? Was I wrong to demand respect as the price for my presence? Or did I finally understand what fatherhood really costs? Not money, not time, but dignity. And once it's gone, what else can you do but leave the bill on the table and walk away?